Hello everyone and welcome to our new podcast series, Conversations with Pav and Chitra,
where we have conversations about things that are on our mind, maybe things that are on your mind, and hopefully topics that are relevant for everyone. I'm Pavna Patel.
And I'm Chitra Nagaraj.
And we have been friends since childhood. We've cheered each other on in every phase of life, and we've also helped each other out when it comes to the ups and the downs.
And this time we wanted to do something a little different, and hence was born the podcast series, Conversations.
We are so proud to launch our very first episode of this series just in time for International Women's Day.
Our very first episode of the podcast series is New Beginnings. For us, this podcast is a brand new venture that we are embarking on, and anything new can be a little daunting.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, from the time that we thought about this concept to penning it down to where we are today and then how it will be received, I definitely have the nervous jitters. I'm not sure if you're feeling the same way.
Absolutely, I do.
But you know what? With new things, there can be a lot of excitement as well. There can be a fuel to our purpose, and it can also lead to other new beginnings.
For us, this podcast is a way for us to explore our life, bring meaning to it, share it with you. Be creative, be inspired, and engage with the community to make a positive difference in any way we can.
And on that note, we decided that we're going to start all of our episodes with something a little quirky and fun, like a fun fact or a joke or a quote. So today, Chitra will be kicking us off.
Well, I do in fact have a quote for you. It's by Martin Luther King Jr. He once said, "You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step."
I love that, and it's very much in line with our topic of new beginnings. And to follow on from that, and for inspiration from that, we have a very special guest joining us today on our first episode.
Dr. Pradnya Dugal is a radiologist and the founder of Synergy Radiology. She is also the founder of Junka Films Production Company in Sydney, and two of the films that she produced premiered at the Sundance Film Festival.
Amazing. And she's definitely a woman of many new beginnings. She is a migrant. She's a country girl who moved to the city. She is a female radiologist who's made her mark in her industry. And as Chitra just said, she's also a film producer.
And she's navigated the fears and uncertainties with such grace. On International Women's Day, we could not think of anyone better to have as our first guest on our show. Please welcome Dr. Pradnya Dugal.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We are so happy to have you. To kick off, I think we just wanted to get a little bit of background about your childhood and where you grew up.
Okay, so as you mentioned, I'm a country girl who ended up coming to the city. So I was actually born in rural New South Wales, so in the outback. My parents migrated here from India in the 1970s. So my father came out as a young doctor, and he went out into the outback, and he ended up becoming a flying doctor to service, remote patients all over, those vast areas. Yeah. And so that's where I was born, out there at the nearest base hospital, and that's where I spent all my early childhood years. After that, my family moved to a small coastal town of Port Macquarie, and that's pretty much where I spent most of my childhood.
Nice.
And so, this was in the 1970s, 1980s Australia, a very different time. We were the only Indian family in the town, and it was a beautiful place to grow up, beautiful beaches, amazing coastline, but also, had some challenges where we were sort of the only Indian family, and we kind of had to balance that home life with your school life, etc. Mm-hmm. And then around year 10, 1990, is when we moved to Sydney. So at that time, my family was thinking about, our future education, and they thought it was probably better for us to be in the city for our higher school education and then university. Mm-hmm. So we ended up moving to Sydney. At that time, I ended up completing year 11 and 12 here in Sydney at Abbotsleigh, which is a ladies' college here, and then ended up getting into medicine, and I studied at Sydney University.
Oh, wow, wonderful. Thank you. Well, what about the practices of Synergy Radiology? So you've got practices all across Sydney now. Can you tell us a little bit about those practices, what you focus on, and where they are located?
Yeah, sure. So I graduated in radiology about 2005, and at that time we were trying to decide what we wanted to do, whether to keep working in the hospital or whether to set up our own practices. And in the end, we got together with a group of like-minded colleagues, and we decided we wanted to start our own practice, and really practices that focused on the best quality imaging. We were all subspecialty trained in different areas of medicine. We wanted to bring that sort of medicine to our patients. We wanted to start a new work culture, where we had a team, a hand-picked team of really qualified staff. So we've been going now for 18 years, and we started off with a partnership with 5 doctors. First day, we had a handful of staff, maybe 5 staff manning the practices. But since then, we grew our practices into a network of sites across Sydney. So a lot of them are in the Hills District and in the Inner West. And now we have over 10, main practices. We have over 300 staff. We have a lot of 30 doctors. And still going. We also provide a lot of remote services, teleradiology services to some of the hospital, and also we do Australia-wide dental imaging services. So it's kind of grown and grown over that time. We do a complete comprehensive range of services as well. So radiologists is basically diagnostic medical imaging services as well as interventional services. And that encompasses all the modalities from X-ray and ultrasound to CT scans, MRI scans, mammography and women's imaging, nuclear medicine, and then we do a whole lot of interventional procedures as well.
Amazing. It seems like you've got so much going on. I guess as a South Asian woman entrepreneur, to get from where you were to what you're doing currently, there must have been sort of challenges that you would have faced, I guess, along the way. If you had to sort of outline 1 or 2 main challenges that you faced.
Sure. Look, I think, definitely there's, a lot of challenges just for the fact of being a woman, let alone a South Asian woman, to be honest. So going through the training, even as a medical student, I guess being female, there's often just an assumption that you will go down a certain pathway. They kind of feel like you're discouraged from pursuing specialty areas and especially things like surgery, and they just assumptions are made that you'll just go, you go into general practice or go into female-friendly areas and this sort of thing. So you kind of have to combat that to start with. Sometimes it's just expectations that are placed on you that you don't even, you don't really want to go down that pathway. After that, then setting up in practice, I'm one of the founding partners of our business. And so again, I'm the only female partner in the group, and all my male partners are absolutely lovely. But it's again that situation of, it's not necessarily that we didn't want to invite other females to be part of it, but often females felt the pressure themselves of how could I possibly balance that responsibility with my family responsibility, not only just balancing my career, but also being actually a partner in a business and taking on that extra level of responsibility. But the partners that we ended up coming on board with were so supportive and really wonderful, and they understood that I wanted to have some flexibility, to have some days at home where I could work from home and just be able to be with my young children, because by then I had two children when we set up, and then I had my 3rd child a few years into our practice. So I can't say that, they've been very supportive, and I'm very grateful to them for that. But I think other things that you face just as a female doctor in general, and maybe being of South Asian appearance, where you do get prejudged, I suppose. People have preconceived ideas when they see you of who you are, or what you might do. And in my professional circles, you have a certain level of professional acknowledgement and respect. Everybody knows your credentials, and you don't have to explain yourself or prove yourself. But sometimes, like, say for example, I'll go in to see a patient and I'll be doing a procedure on them, and they'll just look at me, and then they'll, I've had it multiple times. First of all, they assume I'm the nurse, and I have to explain to them that I'm the doctor, and then that I'm doing a certain procedure on them, and then they'll look at me and they'll say, "Have you ever done this before?" This sort of thing, and then they always seem a bit surprised when I say, "Yeah, I've probably done this thousands of times before." So you do kind of come across that as well. So you do face that a lot, and it's very frustrating, but you just kind of you kind of explain to them and educate them, and
I know you said it's evolving, but has it evolved a lot, or is there still a lot of work to be done there?
Oh, look, it's definitely evolved, and I feel really grateful for my, the current cohort of young female trainees going through the system. It's actually changed so much in 20 years since I had to go through it. Because now there are job share situations. We have a lot more support networks. A lot of the medical societies, like the Australian Medical Association and other, there's a medical women's society. They have support groups. We have things like social media now, Facebook. There's big big groups on that for
Yeah.
female doctors or women in medicine,
Yes.
where we can all like connect with each other and support each other and give each other advice
Yeah,
and
great.
that network in that way. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot. It's definitely come a long way, but
Yeah.
certainly I think gender equality has still got a long way to go. I
Yeah.
think equal pay, equal conditions, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay.
All right, well, I'm going to switch to your film career now, and in keeping to the theme of new beginnings, which is what our episode is about, you were an established radiologist, or are an established radiologist with your practices, and you went into the film industry, which was something completely new, completely different even. So what drove you to explore that field of film?
Yeah, it's a bit of a crazy story, really. So, as you know, as I said, I grew up in a very small beach town, surfy town, with a very beach surfy culture.
Yeah.
We were the only Indian family. And I really kind of almost felt like growing up, I led a bit of a double life, really. Like at home, I was still kind of in a very traditional Indian family home environment, but then I'd go to school and you're trying to blend in with all the Aussie kids.
Yeah.
And you grow up watching TV, and the demographics you saw on television and in movies, on screens, was always Anglo-Saxon faces.
Absolutely.
You never ever saw anyone who looked like yourself. You never saw anyone that was, balancing other cultural backgrounds.
Yeah.
And you just felt like an outsider, and you felt like a minority. Yes, and even just whole ideals and standards of what's considered attractive or what's considered, like popular or what's considered, so I kind of grew up with that sensation of feeling, like an outsider a little bit, and not quite fitting in anywhere. Like, even my kids still say this to me sometimes. Funnily enough, second, third generation immigrants, but that sometimes you feel too Australian to be Indian, but too Indian to be Australian.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard that mentioned by a lot of people. But then the one thing we used to do back then is we do a yearly trip to Sydney, because that's when we would have to get all our groceries for the year. Because there was no Indian stores or anything there, so we'd have to come do our yearly trip to the Indian grocery store in Sydney, and that's when we'd pick up VHS tapes of the latest Bollywood films, right? And so then we'd watch these films when I got home, and then I would just be fascinated by these movies, because I've never, obviously seen people who look like us on the screen, and very different stories, but I just love the costumes, and I just fell in love with the dancing. And so when we moved to Sydney, that's when I immediately said I wanted to start learning Indian dancing, and that's when I started learning classical dance and Bharatanatyam.
So there were no classical dances or classes in Port Macquarie at that time?
We were the only Indian. There was no nothing.
You were the only one dancing.
I was just dancing in front of the TV. No, but so when we came to Sydney, then I took the opportunity and started learning, and that really gave me a connection to my cultural roots. It really gave me an extra level of understanding of because a lot of Bharatanatyam is founded in Hindu philosophy, and so a lot of that comes with not just learning the dance, but just learning all about the culture, about the religious backgrounds, and all those sort of things. So even learning to drape the dance sari, and learning a new appreciation for the attire and everything. And so I really just fell in love with it. And then obviously this childhood dream was, one day I would love to put a dance into wouldn't it be amazing to be a dancer in a film, right? So fast forward a few years, I actually did my Arangetram when I was a medical student. I just was so keen, I learned really fast, and ended up doing all of that. And continued dancing all through medical school, but then once I became an intern and I was continuing on as a young doctor, it kind of got all a little bit too much. I said I need to take a little bit of a break, and that break ended up becoming 10 years, because and life got in the way. Ended up getting married, I had children, had to progress through my training and my medical training, and so funnily enough, 10 years later, I found myself really missing dancing and thinking, that was such a big part of my identity, and I would really love to go back to it. But by this stage, after my pregnancy, I had gained 25 kilos. I had to lose that weight. I was very out of form. I'd lost a lot of confidence, and I just didn't know how to go back to it. I was quite afraid actually to go back to it. I felt like, how am I going to do this? So then I thought, well, let's try something different and something fun, and looked up Bollywood dancing. And at that time, it's not like now where there's Bollywood classes everywhere. Back then there was like one or two schools that you could go to. So I remember Googling this class and then realising, I'd really like to do it, but I was so scared to do it, I just kept Googling it for a year before I finally went to the first class. But once I got back and I really got into it, I just, I guess once you're a dancer, it's in your body, it's in your muscle memory, and it just came back to me so quickly, and I just loved it so much. And then I just took off from there, and over a few years, I started my own Bollywood dance company called Monsoon, and we were choreographing, we were performing like a lot of fusion, like Bollywood style dance, but fusion with fused classical and sort of modern dance as well. Nice. And so I know this is a very long-winded story, but so then from there, I remember around 10 years ago, so 2015, I was nominated for an award with the IABCA, which is India Australia Business and Community Awards, and they hold like annual awards in the Indian community. And that year, I won the award for Professional of the Year. And so for my work in radiology and in medicine, and sort of acknowledging all the work I've done with AMA and other things. So in my acceptance speech, I basically paid tribute to my dad and my parents and their generation, because they're the ones that have made the sacrifices of coming here, migrating here with nothing, for the future of their children, and for the opportunities that we now have. It's all due to them. And I kind of painted the story, but I also told the story about my dad, who coming here, going out to the country, and then realising how vast the Australian outback is, and that he had to so he decided himself to go and learn how to fly a plane and become his own flying doctor service. And there was a filmmaker in the audience who heard the story, and he came up to me afterwards. He said, "That's an amazing story. Have you ever thought about making that into a film?" And I was like, so that's how the conversation started. And I remember saying to my husband, someone's asked me, we should make this film. And at first it was a bit of a laugh. It's like, yeah. And then he looked at my face and goes, you're actually serious. And I said, life is too short. You know what? Yeah. Let's explore this. So we ended up exploring the whole film, making a film side of things. And in the end, that story, we didn't end up making that film because we realised the logistics and the costs to make something like that. But we kind of went down a different pathway, and I ended up producing my first Bollywood-style film, but in Marathi in India. And I put my dance scene in that. Got to put my dance scene in that film, and so that was like a little childhood dream fulfilled. But funnily enough, then once you get into that space, it just opens so many new doors. And that was a big learning experience, that first film. I was a complete newbie and very naive about it, but that opened a lot of other doors, and in the end I ended up getting offers to then go and do produce films in the USA. So we made a couple of indie films, so independent films, Hollywood independent films, which both went to the Sundance Film Festival. And once one door opens, other doors open. You make new connections, you make new networks, and I just realised I just love it, and I just wanted to find projects that told really beautiful stories or impactful stories, and things that resonated with me. Often I noticed a lot of cross-cultural themes, which I think really resonates with me, and a lot of people, considering our multicultural society. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Look, I want to talk to you about procrastination. This is something that I know I definitely struggle with, and we've talked about this as well. So we all have these ideas or things that we want to move forward with. And we're passionate when we think of them, right? Like especially during the beginning of the year with New Year resolutions and so on. And then somehow procrastination creeps in. And that passion, although it might be there, tends to die down, and we tend to put it on a bit of a back burner. Do you struggle with that? And if so, how do you...
I think I already illustrated that I did when it took me a year to get to that first class that I told you about. Look, I think we all definitely deal with that, and I think there's different levels to it. So back in the day, I remember being younger and just having like a little diary or a notebook where you'd have your to-do list, and it would just be like so long, and you feel like you would tick off one every 6 months or something. And But I think now, I mean, number one, we can be so much more organised. We have all these digital tools at our hand. You can have, so what things I do, like I think there's certain things, like certain levels, as I said, probably small tasks, which can be very easily achievable and, quickly done, but as long as you don't put them off. And then there's like big picture kind of tasks, right? So with the small tasks, I think, we all have iPhones, or we have, phones and all these apps available to us. What I do is put in things like, little digital entries in my calendar or on the phone, and so I just slot in a time for things to get done, and, that way, and, if for whatever reason it just doesn't get done, you can just reschedule it,
That's
so
right.
you use these kind of tools. I'm kind of, got all these synchronized calendars with my husband and my family and my work partners and my girlfriends, so you can
We're all on
actually,
the same page.
it's all about getting very organized
Yes.
with those sort of things,
So
and
true.
then you're accountable only to yourself, really.
Yeah.
But with the big picture things, like you want to start something new, you have a new project that you really want to, you want to try something that you've never done before. You have a passion project that you really, you want to get off the ground, and it just seems so overwhelming that you just don't even know like where to start. I think the main thing is you just got to take that first step, and that's probably sometimes all you need to get the momentum going. You don't need to have the entire project laid out in front of you and you know exactly where you're going. You don't have to know where your end point is. So I think for me, I think it's just, you just need to dabble, have a little dabble. And that's what I kind of did with, going with the dancing. I thought I couldn't possibly face going back to really rigorous Bharatanatyam classes, but let me just dabble in a Bollywood dance class. With the film, you can dabble in a course, so, maybe educate yourself, so go and find a course in it. So I ended up going and signing up to a few courses at AFTRS, which is the Australian Film, Television and Radio School. So I did an intensive course in filmmaking, and that just gave me that extra bit of confidence and background and knowledge just to feel like, okay, I can get my foot in the door. And then I've gone back recently and I've gone and done a course on directing, and I've bought myself a whole bunch of books and started reading up on screenwriting, because that's my next project that I'm planning to do. And and I think we're just so lucky because in this day and age we have so much available to us through the internet. People teach themselves all kinds of things through YouTube videos and tutorials, and I just think we live in a very exciting age where all this information is actually accessible, and you can help yourself get along that procrastination pathway just a little bit easier.
Absolutely.
Great advice.
I mean, you touched on this in terms of just start. So I guess we've just started and you're here for our start, so thank you. But I guess there is also this idea in our minds in terms of, will this actually succeed? So I've started, this is great, but there's also this niggling sense of, is this going to go ahead, and what if this fails, for example? It's like a sense of failure. And I guess, did you feel any of that in either of your endeavours? And again, how do you kind of overcome that?
I think fear of failure has been something that's been a big deal for me right from childhood, and when you say, when you talk about fear of failure, it actually takes me right back to a scene in my mind back in high school, where we were sitting in our English class, and our English teacher actually put a question out to the whole classroom and said, let's go around the room and everyone tell me what's your greatest fear. And we were going around, and this is a bunch of 13, 14-year-old kids, year 8, year 9 sort of level, and it was very concrete, like a lot of them were, I'm really scared of sharks, because clearly we were in a beach town, and people would say, I'm really scared about what if my parents died and I became an orphan, or like really which are very significant fears. So then he came to me, and then I actually said, my biggest fear is fear of failure.
Wow.
And he was quite taken aback, and everyone was just looking at me strangely. And then, and I just, because I think, as a South Asian, maybe you're being of South Asian background, and seeing how hard your parents have worked to get you where you are, and to have this opportunity, to have this education, you don't want to ever feel like you've let anyone down, that you've made the most of the opportunities given to you. I mean, I was a very nerdy, really nerdy kid. So for me, like, getting 99% instead of 100% was like a failure. Like, this is the kind of, I'm giving you some context here. But I think it was not from any pressure from my parents. It was very much self-imposed pressure. But I think for me, that's definitely been a feeling like, whatever I would do, I have to do it with perfection right from the beginning. And there's almost like, I want to bypass the learning process, and I just want to be like an expert at it straight away. But I think as I got older, and with time and experience, and and a bit of maturity, you just realize, like, actually a lot of the beauty and the joy is in the learning process. That it's actually human to make mistakes, and it's human to to fall over, and you need to be able to learn how to be resilient. You need to be able to pick yourself up. You need to be able to learn from those mistakes. And you need to be able to actually use that to then go on and try again, and the next time, it'll be better. And so I think, that probably the first film so going into the film side of things, the first film, I felt like that. Like I felt, okay, that was not what I was expecting it to be. Made a lot of mistakes and felt like, oh, I never wanted to do this again. But thank goodness, other opportunities came along, and I realised, for example, after that experience, it's really important to make sure you have good legal advice and you've got people that you trust and that there's transparency and all that sort of thing, and learn from that process. And got myself a very good entertainment lawyer for the next few films that we did in LA, and she was amazing, and to the point where like the next project that I was almost going to go into, from her advice we ended up pulling out of, and 8 years later that film still hasn't been made. So that was like dodged a bullet from from learning from, and that's part of like that learning process. And if I hadn't made those mistakes, then I wouldn't have gone on to do the other projects that I've done. So I think you have to kind of take it as try to reframe it in your mind as a constructive experience rather than a debilitating or experience or a negative experience. I think, and we're all always learning that. I mean, you try to teach that to your kids, you're still teaching it to yourself. But
good advice.
I think the other thing is also maybe with age is just to learn to have a little bit of a sense of humour about things too. So sometimes maybe not to take yourself so seriously, because sometimes you just need to be able to take a step back and just be able to laugh at something and say, okay, this doesn't feel very funny right now, but I know in a few years when I look back on it, I'll have a good laugh about this. But you know what, it's part of the process, and it's going to take me to the next step.
Next question is actually related to what we were just talking about. It's more about criticism coming from other people. And we face criticism in our day-to-day, no matter what field we're in, but particularly in the film industry, I would imagine that there'd be a lot more. There are sort of judges, your work is criticized by critics, for example. So how do you deal with that, and what kind of attitude would be best to, embody? So, I mean, the film industry, and it is a very, it's pretty brutal industry, really. It's a very competitive industry. And, the more I got into it, the more I realized that, the majority of films never even get made or never see the light of day. It's that competitive. And, for example, to get into film festivals, like the peak festival, so Sundance is probably the peak festival in the USA, they will get 15,000 applications for film entries, of which they will screen 100 films, of which only 8 or 16 will be in like films in competition. So it's really, to get into you have to kind of even know the numbers before you start. It's actually just it is a risky business to go into. So I think with my projects that I went into, I kind of went into them with that attitude that I know this is a big risk, and that I know that it could go completely south, and that, but at the same time, there is a small chance that it could do really well. So then I guess I tried to back projects that I guess had some sort of meaning to me personally, the stories that came out of those films, and also that I wanted to back new upcoming filmmakers. So every single film that I've produced so far has been a debut filmmaker. So I wanted to kind of give them a launching pad. So in a way, it's kind of like when the film first comes out, especially in the premiere, and then the first reviews and critics come out, that's a very nerve-wracking day for everyone, but especially for the debut filmmaker. Me as a producer, as a supporter, has been like, obviously it's nerve-wracking as well, but it's like really critical for them. So I guess for me now, because I guess the next project that I wanted to do are going to be I'm working on my first screenplay, and so that's going to be something that's very personal to me. So that's going to be another level of fear of criticism, I suppose, but making sure that people are going to, accept the film and enjoy the film and actually, give good reviews. So, I think it's part and parcel of it. You just have to, as I said, similar with fear of failure. It's that case of when you do get that criticism, you just have to take it on board, not personally, but as constructive, and to work out how can I improve going forward.
No, thank you. Just taking a slight turn here, we're launching this episode in time for International Women's Day, and I know that would probably signify something special for you, and we'd love to know what that is.
Look, I mean, International Women's Day is a day to just recognise all women, recognise our achievements and our contribution to society. And I think it's wonderful that we actually have a day that celebrates that. And that for a man and a woman to sort of achieve the same level of accolades or professional achievements. Or I think we can all agree that it takes just that much more effort and that much more obstacles for a woman to get there than a man does in our current society. Yeah. So I think it's just really nice to have that day to acknowledge that and to celebrate women. Yeah. I'm a mother of 3 sons. They're now aged 20, 18 and 14. And I just think it's just so important for our younger generation, our children, to see strong, independent women as their role models. Yeah. Because we're shaping our future generations. And I think personally as well, another one for me is that it's a bit of a nod to all the women who came before us, who didn't have the opportunities that we have now. Yes. One particular story is my grandmother, so my maternal grandmother, who was in Mumbai, and she was my pen pal all through my childhood, and we used to write letters to each other. And back then she was married off at the age of 15, had her first child at the age of 16, had all the children before age 20. Yeah. And one of her aspirations when as a young woman was that she would have loved to study medicine and she would have loved to become a doctor. Yeah. But it was not an option. There was no opportunities for her to have that and do that. Yeah. So she was so proud when I told her that I had got into medical school, and in a way she was kind of vicariously living all her dreams through me. Yeah. So I guess in a way, like, she's still my hero because she encouraged me all the way, and back in the day where we actually wrote snail mail to each other, and we had like handwritten letters, and we used to write to each other in French and English and all kinds of things. Yeah. So I think that's kind of another significance of International Women's Day for me.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So you've already achieved so much, Pradnya, both in your medical career as well as in the film industry. And you did talk about screenplay being a potential future thing that a project that you want to take on. What else do you see in the future for yourself in either of those industries, or even a completely new project, for example?
I think you're probably not going to be slowing down anytime soon in medicine. So still working very hard, but loving the work that we do. With the film, so as I said, I'm embarking on my first draft of my first screenplay, and it is going to be a project that combines sort of all my passions, which is medicine, film and dance in one project.
Fantastic.
And I'm circling pretty much back to 10 years ago, which was the reason I kind of got into film. So it's going to be inspired by my dad's story. Yeah, and I think I really want to we're at a stage where people throw around the word diversity a lot more now. Yes. We're recognising the demographics of our current society. We're now in a stage where the last census of Australia showed that 51% of the population comes from a migrant background now, and actually of that, the Indian population is the second largest migrant group after the UK in Australia. And we're also at a stage now where just end of 2023, there's finally a new co-production treaty that's been drafted up. Well, it's actually in action now between Australia and India. So it suddenly opened up the doors to be able to do these collaborations and films and tell our Australian Indian stories. And that's kind of the reason why I wanted to do that write this story, this screenplay, because I don't want to just appeal to other Australian Indians. I actually want to tell our story so that it's actually recognised and relatable to the wider population.
Yeah, fantastic. Really looking forward to all of your projects in the future.
Thank you.
This has been amazing. To be honest, the stories you've told and what you've already done so far, both from a medical perspective and a film perspective, is very inspiring and is very much on point for new beginnings. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your time and your story with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. What a fantastic conversation, Pav, that was.
Sure was.
Look, I have so many key takeaways from that, but if I had to pick 2, mine would be that life is too short, and the second one is take the first step. You don't have to, go and conquer the world. Just take the first step, go in there and dabble.
Yeah, look, I agree. And if I had to say something, I loved the way she said fear of failure is part of the journey. So failing is okay, it's constructive. And if you can have a sense of humour about it, it'll just make things a little bit easier.
New beginnings don't always have to be an external pursuit. It can be a mindset shift, a behaviour, a habit that we want to embody.
Yeah. I hope you found this episode inspiring, and we hope you can take away some of the key messages that came from here and make your own new beginning.
That's it
From us,
for today, folks.
Pav,
And Chitra,
your hosts,
signing off.
until next time.